Hello everybody, welcome back. For this video I'm back in the Jeep for an outing that I took on the 2nd of August. I hadn't got any events to go to, so I had a little run out in the Jeep just to a few local sites, one being the Brasside ammunition dump. I went from there on to my old flying club, model flying club at Chesterley Street, up near the village of Craghead. And then after that through Burnup Village, and then back towards Sacriston and back home, doing a couple of photographs of some trains on the East Coast Mainline before I brought the Jeep back home. It was a bit close on petrol on the in the actual fuel tank, but I did have a jerry can with me just in case. But you'll see it at the end of the video. Hope you enjoy it. Since 2008, my Jeeps had the option to appear as an airfield follow me Jeep. Over the years, I've had a few rare opportunities to lead World War II fighters around airfields, including the old flying machine company Spitfire MH434. While living in Washington, the roller shutter garage door gave plenty of height for the Jeep to go in and out with the light box on and the follow me sign on the back. However, after moving to Durham in 2021, the open over garage doors were barely tall enough for the Jeep's canvas roof. This meant that the light box and its frame had to be removed from the Jeep every time it was brought out or put away. Due to the 4 long machine screws that held it to the roof bows, it wasn't a quick job. As a result, the Jeep often was taken out without the light box, the sign, or the checkered flag. After a little thought about the problem, I worked out a fairly easy solution. I was able to grind the welds off the light box support bracket, separating the attachment part of the frame from the part that supports the light box. Where the bracket had been welded, it was drilled with 2 holes into which bolts were fitted. One bolt was for the pivot, while the other one locked the light box in the upright position. This modification would allow the frame to stay attached to the roof bows, while the light box could be folded down out of the way to get it through the garage door. It was now a simple job of removing 2 screws to fold the light box up or down. With my camera, snacks and a drink packed in the Jeep, I set off a little after 10 AM, heading towards Brasside in Durham. Cutting through the country lanes and over the River Wear, I was heading for the site of a former World War II ammunition dump. Ministry of Supply Brasside is located around about 1/3 of a mile north of Franklin Prison in Durham. This site consists of 25 concrete bunkers and storage buildings, plus a handful of brick buildings including the main gate, guardhouse. A railway approached from the southwest side of the site, splitting into 4 sidings. These ran close along the ends of the bunkers, allowing loading and unloading directly from the buildings to the train. The site is all private property, with no trespassing signs around the perimeter, but there is a road to the south giving a view of the buildings. I arrived at the main gate at 10:30 and parked up near the guardhouse for some pictures. A few yards east along the road brought me to a gap in the trees where I could see a building made from concrete blocks. Not being a hardened bunker, I presume this building was for fuses or pyrotechnics. A few yards further was a brick building in rather poor condition. Measuring it on Google Earth, it measures about 40 by 30 feet. Standing apart from the other buildings on the site, I've no idea whether this was an admin building, stores, mess room or something else. The trees thickened up beyond here, so I carried on around the road to what appeared to be the rear gate to the site. Large stone blocks barred the gateway, but it gave a good vantage point to stand on. The road inside the gate was still there, but piled high with gravel. The bunkers lay ahead and to the left of the gateway. From here, several more of the bunkers were visible, complete with the earth revetments. I had my DSLR camera with the 300mm lens to get some closer pictures than my phone could manage. Hedges and trees obscured the site further around the road, so I turned the Jeep around and set off for my next visit. The next location was 11 miles away and a slow climb of 620 feet, bringing me to almost 800 feet above sea level at the Chesterley Street Radio Model Club flying site. Before buying my first Jeep, my previous hobby was radio control model flying. I joined the club in early 1983, buying a 3-channel trainer kit from a local model shop in Durham. This is the original box art from the kit, which is still on the wall of my workshop. For a while in the early 1990s, I was the club chairman, but all that seems like ancient history now. The drive to the flying site was a trip down memory lane, and as it was a nice day, I hoped there'd be some current members flying. I arrived at the site at 11:20, and nobody was there. That was disappointing. I'd hoped for some pictures and video. I parked on the side of the road, where I'd parked hundreds of times before. The field to the right of the Jeep was the original club flying site when I first joined. This field is no longer used for flying. Back in 1983, it was this field where my trainer, the Leicester Model Centre Hunter 29, took its first flight one Friday evening in May. I took to flying very quickly, landing on my second flight. I flew the trainer inside out over the next year, before moving on to a low-wing aerobatic trainer for 1984. That aircraft was a Monarch Graduator, powered by an OS-35 Max engine. It was the first aircraft I had that carried a camera. This was 4 years before the first digital camera was made. The camera was a 15-shot Helena disc camera, which used 10mm square negatives and had a manual wind-on. This view along the Graduator wing shows me in the pits, with the other models and aircraft around. Here's the camera mounted on another model sometime later, showing the servo which pressed the camera button. Aiming the camera was purely by pointing the wing of the aircraft towards the pilot or chosen target. This picture of the flying site just caught the pits in the bottom left, with the path back to the gate and the roadside parking. In the centre distance is the radio mast at Burnhope. A couple of years later, I was flying this 3/4 scale version of a Pat French Models Team Special. The same camera was mounted ahead of the cockpit, looking back over the tail. The tiny negatives of the camera limited the quality of the images. Across 1987 and 88, I built this twin-engine camera plane as part of an A-level design project. Spanning 8 feet, it was powered by 2 Irvin 61 engines on anti-vibration mounts. The camera shot 35mm film and was an auto wind-on, mounted in a pod between the fuselages. This composite image was made from 7 passes over the runway and the road. The camera was aligned along the length of the aircraft, so the long side of the photographs was fore and aft on the plane. I'm standing at the end of the cross runway. In 1989, the club had to leave the field. This sunset picture is one of my aircraft making the very last flight from this site. Just after landing that Friday evening, the farmer ploughed up the field. This field saw so much flying in its day, from learners to experienced pilots, night flying, the Toffee bomber, flying off mud and snow on skis, a radio-controlled airboat converted from a plastic sledge, delta wings, flying drain pipes, gliding and helicopters. There was no electric flight or drones. That wasn't a thing back then. After a brief move to an old colliery site about a mile away, the club returned to the farm, setting up the new field over the road from the original field. There's an enclosed parking area inside the field now, but back in 1989, we were still parking on the roadside. The new runway and pits were laid out as before, with an additional pits to the northeast corner to save crossing the active runway if the wind was from the west. I flew my first large petrol-powered model from this site in 1990. It was an own design, 7.5 feet span, low-wing monoplane, powered by a Zenoa 38cc engine. The following year, that engine went into a 1/4 scale Fokker E5 monoplane. The aircraft was mostly built by a friend in the club who decided he'd never finish it and give it to me. It was a great plane to fly, but very tricky on the ground due to the high centre of gravity. This was partly due to the scale rolled ply wing. My first little B-17, the 1/10 scale one, also did some engine tests and taxi trials up at Chesterley Street. This aircraft was eventually test flown at RAF Catterick in July 1993. On VE Day in May 1994, my scratch-built 1/6 scale P-47D Thunderbolt made its maiden flight to Chesterley Street. This used the same 38cc Zenoa engine. On Easter Sunday in April 1999, my new P-47N Thunderbolt made its maiden flight from Chesterley Street. I think this was the last model I test flew from the site. I moved to Washington in late 1999 and left the club. This aircraft was a similar construction to the original P-47D, but had the longer wingspan of the N version, split into 3 sections. It was powered by a 3W40cc electronic ignition engine, which had more horsepower than the Zenoa 38 in the first P-47. Sometime between 1999 and 2001, the cross runways and pits were replaced with one large rectangle of mown grass. Then between 2001 and 2006, 2 large wind turbines were installed close to the flying site. The closest turbine can be seen behind the Jeep, and it does make the site less appealing to flying large models. I waited around at the site until near noon, but nobody turned up to fly, so I decided it was time to move on to somewhere else. I set off towards Burnhope to take a slightly different route home. It was a little over 3 miles from the flying field to my next stop, 3/4 of a mile southeast of Burnhope. I pulled into a lay-by for some pictures of the Jeep, with the large radio mast of Burnhope in the background. This is the same mast that was seen in the snow picture taken at the flying field. Another mile along the road, and I pulled over where I had a great view over the valley towards Durham. This shot shows Durham Cathedral, 600 feet below the location where the picture was taken from. Panning the camera to the left, looking in a northeast direction, Penshaw Monument can be seen breaking the horizon just under 9 miles away. The monument, officially the Earl of Durham's Monument, is a memorial in the style of an ancient Greek temple on Penshaw Hill. A little more to the left, the tall office block in the centre of Washington can be seen 8 miles away. This wasn't far from where I used to live. In the distance on the right is Cleadon Water Tower, 15 miles away. I carried on along the road, stopping once more at the turn at the end for a few more pictures of the Jeep and the view. I set off back in the direction of home, passing through Sacriston and stopping via a road bridge near Plawsworth. This crossed over the East Coast Main Rail line at the site of the former Plawsworth railway station. I parked on the road down to the original station and walked to the bridge to watch out for a couple of trains. Within about 10 minutes there was a northbound LNER Class 801. A few minutes later there was another Class 801 heading southbound. By this time I was getting hungry, so I decided to head home rather than wait around for any more trains. I took a few more pictures of the Jeep at the station site, then set off for home via the country lanes again. Having checked the fuel before I set off, I knew it was going to be low when I got back home, so just in case I put a 10-litre jerry can in the back of the Jeep should it be needed. When I got home I lifted the filler cap on the tank to see around about 1 inch of fuel left. That was plenty. Past experience has shown that to be about 10 miles range. Now it was just a quick job to take the 2 light box screws out, to lower it down and put the Jeep back in the garage. It had been an enjoyable 3-hour ride out and was satisfying that the modification made putting the Jeep away much easier. Thanks for watching. I do hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe and like the video because, as you all know from other content creators, it all helps with the algorithm. See you next time. Bye.